In Australia, the government voted not to launch a medical inquiry into transgender medicine. I guess that's appropriate because today is National Pronouns Day, or International Pronouns Day, I guess. So we can't actually look under the hood of transgender medicalization, not on National Pronouns Day. My pronouns, if you want to play along, are whatever your biological instinct tells you that they are. I'm not going to gaslight you and tell you to call me something that your instinct tells you it's not. The motion in Australia was voted down 21 to 16 votes. This was a motion put forward by the Victorian Liberals, led by MP Moira Deeming. Now, she actually is partyless right now. She was expelled from this party, and we're going to get to why in a minute. Here she is, waiting out votes in Parliament. Now, she is called a radical feminist for saying things like, I don't know, sex-based rights should exist. Many also find it offensive that she would wear things like this. What she's saying here is that she wants an apology. We're going to talk in a minute about what she is owed an apology for. But first, a little bit about the initiative that Australian politicians decided we don't need to see that. What they do not want is a medical inquiry into what is called gender-affirming healthcare. We've talked about that before. I don't like this term because it's a misleading term. It doesn't mean you affirm someone's biology. It means you affirm their ideology. So if they say they are a different gender, you affirm the medicalization of their body through sex change surgeries and cross-sex hormones. The initiative called on Parliament to recognize that, quote, medical affirmation of gender dysphoric children and adolescents is currently one of the most controversial areas of medicine. This is true. And that there, was just that there's no consensus about how to do it. There's no, for instance, if I were to go in and say, I want some testosterone to look more masculine, basically, that medicine is treated like a Clinique counter. They just turn it up and turn it down based on how I am responding. There's no like, what's your weight? How much, what's your medical history? That this is treated as a cosmetic type thing. There's no real data around how safe it is, how much each person should be on, whether it contradicts other medical conditions. It's just not used that way. Now, this law would have required Parliament to investigate whether or not this is appropriate for children and maybe set some guidelines, and politicians said no. Who would oppose this? Why? Why do you not want studies about what this does to children's bodies? Well, we have a template, actually, from Dr. Meredith McNamara. She is an assistant professor at the Yale School of Medicine in the U.S. She often speaks to Congress. She speaks on behalf of what's called gender-affirming care. This is her last October, so a year ago now, admitting that gender-affirming care would never pass clinical trials or any studies.
Moving on, the state claims that the absence of randomized controlled trials negates all evidence for the benefits of gender-affirming care. First, an RCT, or randomized controlled trial, for gender-affirming care would never pass an institutional review board safety or ethical standard.
Duh. Right? No. One, you can't do that to children, like for experimentation. I mean, we won't study it. We'll just do it and experiment on children in the wild. And no, of course, it would never pass because we already know that cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers are associated with all manner of unwanted health outcomes. For instance, let's see, memory loss, bone density loss, hair loss, early onset osteoporosis, muscle loss, anxiety. I mean, we could be here all day if we really talk about what these things do to young people's bodies. She also testified to Congress this June and was unable to provide any research that gender-affirming care is actually a helpful thing to do. Here is her being questioned by Texas Representative Dan Crenshaw.
There is great uncertainty about the effects of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries in young people. The Journal of Endocrine Society came up with the same conclusion, even the American Academy of Pediatrics. They all cite the lack of evidence. And so here's the thing. If you're doing a therapy, and it's, temporary, whatever, fine, maybe let's try it, let's see if it works. But when you're talking about permanent physiological changes Do you not agree, just from an ethical standpoint, that you might want extremely strong evidence of the benefits? And there is no systematic review that states that there is strong evidence of benefits.
Sir, are you aware of how the quality evidence grading system works and how it's applied?
Yeah, we read through it. That's why I'm citing these journals. So which journal says something different? We should have that debate. Tell me a journal that has done systematic reviews that cites different evidence, that cites strong evidence for benefits of these therapies.
The standards of care were developed based on extensive.
You're not telling me any journal, you're not telling me any study. Don't say
That's not
standards
what
of care.
Yeah. So
Tell me one.
the standards of care.
That's the standards of care.
Yes,
That's
standards of
not
care.
a journal. That's not a study. That's not an organization. That's not an institution. You're just saying words. Name one study.
Yeah.
I'm out of time. I yield back.
No,
How
she
embarrassing.
can't. Yeah, and so what she's saying here by standards of care is basically a wish list of how trans activists want to be treated. It is not based on any medicine. In fact, there's a court case right now in Alabama where lawyers have demanded that. So the standards of care is written by an organization called WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Right now in Alabama, a court has pulled WPATH into this case where a young girl wants to be gender affirmed, and that's being taken to court. And the court says, well, we want to know how the standards of care came about. Is it based on any research? Is it based on, and so they have pulled WPATH into that lawsuit. WPATH fought like hell to be removed and said, we don't have anything to do with this. We absolutely don't want to be a part of this. And the court ruled, you do have to show us how you come up with the standards of care. They now have sealed that. So they're asking for that ruling to be held off from the public. And now the court is ruling on whether or not that's in the public interest to see, because they cannot provide medical research to show that it is okay to give an 11-year-old puberty blockers. They cannot provide research to show that it does not create medical problems by chopping off healthy breasts or penises or balls. Sorry for the use of the jargon there.
Balls are fine.
Balls? Okay.
Yeah.
They just can't. For instance, WPATH considers hysterectomies a medically necessary component of gender-affirming surgical care. Hysterectomies with no age limit. They removed all age limits in last year's WPATH guidelines, even though recent studies show that women who received hysterectomies prior to menopause have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke. So take a young girl, get rid of that uterus. She doesn't need it because that is medically necessary for gender-affirming care, because a uterus can make you very dysphoric to have one, apparently. So we know that these are dangerous things. So
I think it's kind of interesting. I'm sorry, this is a separate kind of point, but Dan Crenshaw, Eye Patch McCain, who was absolutely in love of going to war in Ukraine and funneling billions of dollars to Ukraine to attack innocent people, loves that, but he's really putting his foot down on gender affirming care. I just find that I just can't wrap my head around these congressmen sometimes.
But those are apples and oranges, I guess. Yeah, I mean, not for the biopharmaceutical complex.
I loved his
but
questions.
For the the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Good old Eye Patch McCain. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, you've derailed me a little bit. So what we're saying here is that if there's going to be medical research into transgender medicalization of the body, it will not be in Australia, and most likely it won't be in the U.S. either, because who's going to fund that? It's wrongthink, right? Nobody wants to see those answers, even though we continuously get studies about the effects of hormones. I was reading a book about adolescents recently, talking about like young boys who are late to their growth spurt, and even then doctors are like, you really shouldn't give them hormones to like bring on a child's growth spurt. That's really dangerous. So we know that hormones are dangerous under the normal course of things, if it's just like a boy who wants to bulk up and be taller by his freshman year, but we're fine to do it for this sort of cosmetic reason around gender dysphoria. We also know that the studies on this are conclusive. I'm comfortable saying that puberty usually resolves gender dysphoria, and usually those people end up being pretty healthy gay people. So what we're doing is sterilizing gay kids, and we're removing the process that normally handles gender dysphoria. It's normally puberty that cures gender dysphoria, but we're stopping puberty so the dysphoria persists. And we also know conclusively that gender-affirming care does not resolve gender dysphoria. People who do all of this stuff to their bodies still feel dysphoric. It persists. Okay, back to Moira Deeming. She is the Australian politician who really gave impassioned speeches to get the government to look into this, even though it failed. She was expelled from the Victorian Liberal Party recently because she read a speech at a rally, and I'm going to show it to you for a second. Now, she still has not been reinstated to her party. She continues to work as an MP, but even for speaking out on behalf of a Muslim woman's ideology as a gendered woman, as a biological woman, this is the thing that got her expelled from her political party. Watch.
Today I'm actually going to read out a message from a Muslim friend of mine who was too afraid to be here because of behaviour like that. She has said that she came to Australia because she knew that in Australia human rights were advocated for strongly, and she would have protection in Australia. She thought that Australia was a paradise, especially for herself as a woman. And she thought that in Australia, everybody, regardless of religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, any other belief of any other kind, they got to respect each other's beliefs and boundaries. And now she is devastated to find out that she has less rights in Australia than she did back home. She has said that boundaries are the emotional, mental and physical fences of every human that are erected in order to protect and maintain our psychological and physical needs, whether it be a human or an animal. And if an animal can understand and respect boundaries, why can't they? She is seeking that the government will do their job and stand up for the rights that she was promised when she came to Australia lawfully and legally, and that she said if the LGBTQI can have their rights, that's fine, but why does it involve taking away everybody else's rights? And she wants to say a big thank you to everybody out here today, and especially Kelly J. Thank you.
Okay, so that speech got her expelled from her political party just for wearing a shirt that said woman and speaking on behalf of another woman. There were
I'm surprised they didn't burn her at the stake for that.
Right?
Come on.
It was a real Joan of Arc moment.
Yeah.
So that's why we showed you her website earlier in the show. Says that she's seeking an apology because she shouldn't have been punished for that. But she's still going to continue to, there it is, that all she wants is an apology for that, and she's still going to continue to push for studies into transgender medicine. Now, her ballot did not pass, but it did have support from state opposition in Victoria. It just didn't get enough backing from what they call crossbench parties. So maybe because it was a 16 to 21 vote, it's fairly close. Something like this may come to pass, but again, probably not in any other country like the United States, at least not for now. So let us know what you think of this in the chat below, because again, it's International Pronoun Day. Dude.
I mean, let us know if you think that it's okay for Australia to have voted not to launch a medical inquiry into transgender medicine.
Yeah.
Like to not want to know what the effects are.
Well, we don't in the United States. We don't want that either. You know, there are some European countries who were really early, like Sweden, on medicalization of gender that are now pulling back. But, you know, a lot of times when there is research like this to be done, it won't get funded because research is funded by the biopharmaceutical industry. And we've talked many times about how a lot of these puberty blockers, when they're used to treat cancer patients, they're charged maybe $4,000 a dose. But when they're used to treat transgender patients, it's $9,000. So this is really profitable for the biopharmaceutical industry. They have no reason to fund studies to show anything, you know, untoward about the use of this. So again, let us know what you think.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.